Our world's very own definition of life, substituted for such meanings of poverty and insecurity in a matter of months. Speaking on behalf of whoever remains on this saltless planet, our actions were too little, too late. It was just weeks before the world recognized the epidemic for how dangerous it could be, that the world was warned of the virus, killing large numbers in south of Canada. But there was no response from major authorities. After the Black Friday outbreak, the epidemic was deemed containable, but incurable. For weeks, the news kept coming in, showing thousands of deaths each day in North America. And it was an exact month after Black Friday when the great 50 states and its surrounding countries disappeared from the list of populated Earth. It was a tough Christmas having to say goodbye to America. Back in Australia, it was fair to say many people were worried about the virus, but there was no sign of it reaching our shores. I know I wasn't worried, and neither was Sam. However, it was not easy to ignore, but my life didn't change. I kept working my job, paying my bills, looking after Sam. Life at the time seemed ordinary. It was only weeks later that reports came in of sick victims in north of Europe. It was nearly each day a country was overrun by the virus. Australia's airports were shut down and abandoned, and trading by ship was slowed. Many were struggling to understand how the world just came into 2017, and half of it was gone. Weeks went on still feeling safe, with the occasional compulsory health check in crowded government hospitals. But then it came. Reports of a number of deaths in north of Queensland. State borders were walled with tall wire fences, with few guarded entry and exit points. Tests became more constant, so constant that authorities developed a device to determine your health with a quick blood test from the wrist. Any found unhealthy were taken into custody for further testing. I never could have imagined my freedom would be determined by a quick prick of the finger. At this point I had a valid reason to worry. The world around me continued to become smaller, and finding room in it for me and Sam was the priority. The status of the virus stayed the same for over a month, and just as the world finally started to feel the slightest bit safe again, one of the border posts was deemed unresponsive. In less than 2 weeks, all survivors were transported into the city, and the large surrounding walls were constructed. My home state of Victoria, much like the rest of the world, was under martial law. Food and water supplies were becoming rarer. Anybody who was caught coughing the slightest little bit was killed and bagged. Riots were developing from the lack of food. Sam and I remained in a small apartment that was given to us, and we lived on the rations that were delivered. Authorities started developing farms and plantations to supply food, offering jobs for rewards. Soon they started exiling people from the city, as resources were becoming too little for everyone to feed. Anyone who was not valuable to the overall survival of the city was to fall underneath the punishment of exile. I took a job delivering barley to make bread, while Sam remained at home as she was too young to work. Civilization was starting to rebuild itself. Another month went on like this, delivering barley each day to source a living for me and Sam. Life wasn't the best, but nowhere else in the world seemed to be any better. I was able to accept life for what we had, until one day I came home to silence. Sam was gone, and all that remained was a note on the table saying she'd been exiled for impracticality. It was only 5 months ago that we were in disbelief that Sam would be 18 soon, and there I was in disbelief that we forgot it. I sat beside her bed for the entire night, unable to get to sleep, staring out the window into the world beyond the walls, wondering where Sam was, until my vision went black. The next morning I woke to the sun's rays and still an empty bed beside me. I became to realize that I couldn't sit here till death. I came to realize that I've outgrown these walls. I packed a small backpack with whatever supplies and tools I had, but I did not move outside the apartment. The next day the military men broke down the door and dragged me out. I was exiled as well. The environment outside the city was depressing to look at. There was nothing but degraded buildings and streets, overrun by vegetation. Not a single person in sight, but none of this mattered. All I wanted to know was that Sam was alive. I spent under a week of fighting aggressive wildlife and digging through the rubble of buildings until I saw smoke rising above the horizon. I rushed to get to the fire, but before I got there, a loud gunshot echoed through the decayed streets. My heart stopped, thinking of what may have just happened. I continued running until the fire was in plain sight, and so was Sam, sitting on the roof of a house crying. A man lay on the road beside the fire, had blood spilling from his chest. I hurried to the roof and put my arm around Sam. Tears flood her eyes and run down her face. As we overlooked what was left of our world from the rooftop, the city we were removed from, and the place we were left to, I felt like the world we knew 6 months ago has fallen apart.